Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us for Edison's Top 10 Findings of 2025. I'm Megan Lazovick, VP of Research at Edison Research and SSRS.
Hey, Megan.
Hi,
And
Laura.
I'm Laura Ivey, Research Director at Edison Research and SSRS.
Today, we're very excited to share highlights from our year of research with you. But before we get to the research, well, let's talk about one of the highlights from Edison's year. In October, we became a part of SSRS, which is a fantastic full service market and survey research firm we have long admired here at Edison. SSRS took on the whole Edison team and will continue to provide the same quality insights and research products while also having access to some amazing new resources and, frankly, very smart people at SSRS.
It's been a very exciting change for us. And you know what that also means?
What?
Well, as is our custom, if you've joined us for this webinar in years past, we will select a winner at the end of the webinar and we will send some Edison Research swag your way. This year, we will also have some exciting things from the SSRS team to share.
Oh, darn, I've misplaced my examples. I had a cute little giraffe for you, which happens to be the mascot of SSRS. Anyway, it'll be a surprise when you win your swag bag. But also, Laura, I think it's fair that since we're now a bigger team, instead of selecting one webinar attendee to receive a swag bag, let's select two. Sound good?
That sounds great. That is the plan. Everyone stick around to the end of the webinar. We will randomly select two winners.
This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on edisonresearch.com after today's event. But if you are watching from the future, I'm sorry you missed the giveaway, but I promise there's lots of great data for you today. Free data, I might add, which really is a gift in itself.
And as we reveal these top findings today, please drop any questions you have in that Q&A box. We have researchers standing by to answer you in real time. Those are the same researchers who worked on these projects from our Edison Research team. So we're excited to celebrate all of their work today. So please reach out with Q&A. If you are watching this replay and you do have questions, send us an email, info@edisonresearch.com, and we will make sure we get those questions answered for you.
One other thing to note, as you hear the list, keep in mind these aren't necessarily in order of importance. Depending on your industry, you might find some points to be more relevant to you than others. So here are our top 10. And we have no fancy sound effects. I'm sorry,
You
I'll do a
can
drum
make your
roll.
own, imagine your own. Yes.
All right, number 10 video is redefining the podcast landscape. If you've joined us for our annual Infinite Dial webinar earlier this year, generously sponsored by Odyssey, Cumulus Media, and SiriusXM Media, then you may recall that we made a slight adjustment to our podcast section. Now, considering the study has been the industry benchmark for podcast estimates every year since 2006, we cannot simply change our measurement. We must expand it carefully. So this year, in addition to asking, have you ever listened to a podcast? We also asked, have you ever watched a podcast? And then we rolled that into our overall estimate. So here you see the historical data with the 2025 podcast consumption figured in blue right on the right, with one footnote. The 73% represents Americans aged 12 and older who have ever consumed a podcast, either in audio or video form. Most of podcast consumers both listen to and watch podcasts. Now, that small sliver of light blue, highlighting just 3 percentage points, represents those who reported watching video podcasts but didn't say that they listened. And video podcasts remained a part of the conversation for much of 2025, which led to many people asking the question we used to hear all of the time in the industry's infancy. What exactly is a podcast? To answer that, we partnered with Oxford Road to create a white paper dedicated to better understanding consumers, which drawed upon a nationally representative survey of over 4,000 people. And we learned that according to our survey, 52% of Americans 12 and older considered YouTube-only discussion videos to be podcasts. Now, even if you do not agree with those 52% of Americans, the fact remains that this is the perception of over half the general audience. And it's all the more reason for the industry to accept that video is redefining podcasts.
Well said. Which leads us into our next finding, number 9. YouTube is the top platform for podcast consumption and discovery for Gen Z. The perfect point to follow what you just shared about videos shaping the definition of podcast. Now, data for this point comes from Edison Podcast Metrics and from the Gen Z Podcast Report, a study we did with sponsor Sirius XM Media. Before we talk about Gen Z, though, let's talk about podcast consumption by the larger 13 plus population. You may have seen our colleague Gabe Soto present this point at Podcast Movement earlier this year. According to Edison Podcast Metrics, in looking at weekly podcast consumers ages 13 plus, 32% of them use YouTube most often to consume podcasts, putting YouTube in that top spot. 25% of them use Spotify most often, and 15% use Apple Podcasts most often. Now, when we do zero in on those Gen Z listeners, this is also data from Edison Podcast Metrics. You can see that in that top bar, 36% of them use YouTube most often for podcasts. Continuing to look at that top bar, another 35% use YouTube, but it's not the platform they use most often for podcasts. 35% use Spotify most often, and 29% use Spotify for podcasts, just not most often. You know, you think about it, YouTube is accessible on our phones, our computers, our smart TVs, our smart speakers, but it's not just used for consumption. And that's where the second part of this comes into play. This statistic is from the Gen Z Podcast Report with SiriusXM Media. And it shows us that 28% of Gen Z listeners who have listened to a podcast in the last month discover podcasts most often by searching on YouTube, followed by 26% who use social media posts for podcast suggestions, and 19% who say friends and family are their most used source for podcast discovery. So our next point is also about discovery. And with such a crush of available audio content out there, when everyone is creating and there's so many outlets to consume, discovery is really more important than ever. So we'll go right into finding 8. It's from a fantastic new study that our colleagues Alex Bargiacci and Salma Ali presented just last week, called The Infinite Scroll, a TikTok report from Edison Research. So finding number 8 is TikTok is a platform for discovery from music, podcasts, and audiobooks, and that's particularly among young people. So, when Alex and Salma did this webinar last week, they each kind of told what was on their For You page, and I'll have to say that I'm currently on Joe Jonas parallel parking TikTok. So,
That's the best.
what is on your For You page right now?
Gosh, Laura, that's frankly an extremely personal question. But I'll share. I'll share with you. The algorithm serves me a lot of like gardening and art and books, like the standard grandma core, as the young people would say.
Well, I'm on Gen X TikTok as well. So, and I very much enjoy that. But if you have not seen this study, I would encourage you to download it. It's on our site. It is free. It is packed with findings about TikTok users. But the finding that makes our top 10 list, though, shows that TikTok users aren't just scrolling for entertainment. They're actually finding their next favorite song, their next binge-worthy podcast, even the audiobooks they want to listen to next. As 64% use it for new music, 47% use it for podcasts, and 30% use it with the intention of discovering audiobooks. And it is kind of remarkable if you think about just the volume on TikTok. If you're a TikTok user, you understand this. It's remarkable that people can scroll through hundreds, thousands of videos, and just the right music, just the right podcast clip will spark and catch their attention. Those numbers increase in all 3 categories when you look at TikTok users ages 13 to 24. 75% of them are using TikTok, the platform, to discover new music. Over half are using it to discover new podcasts, and 34% to discover new audiobooks. So clearly, a TikTok presence and strategy is necessary for those who want their content to be discoverable. Now, before I turn it back over to Megan, I want to point out here that the data you've seen so far and the next point coming up, all of this is from public-facing studies. So if you're a regular visitor to edisonresearch.com, or if you get our weekly insights email, if you don't, we'll show you how to at the end of the webinar, you have access to this information. Of course, we have plenty of data available to subscribers, but We believe in putting these findings into the world and building up the industries that we serve. So please take advantage and use this data.
By the way, Laura Salma says justice for Joe Jonas. I know she's a big fan.
See, Salma would know. Salma's also on parallel parking TikTok.
Don't worry, some other celebrity mess up will take over for Joe and he'll be out of the woods soon, I'm sure. Okay, on to number 7. This next finding has not only made our top 10, but it is related to one of the best experiences I can say I've had as a researcher in the field to date. I had the opportunity to conduct observational interviews with a wonderful family whose love of the podcast Wow in the World has enriched their lives in so many ways. So let's start with that video.
Hey, bud. You ready to get up? You gotta get dressed and go to the bathroom and brush your teeth.
My name is Fox. This is Helen. I call her Momo. This is Chris. I call him Dodo. They're kind, loving, and also they spoil me a lot.
You want to bring this today?
Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them.
You got it. Let me know if you need anything, okay? We love Wow in the World. There's books, there's a podcast, there's a YouTube channel. Mindy also has a show on Sirius XM on Kids Place Live, so we get to listen to that too. So for
Absolutely, Mindy is what it's
absolutely, Mindy, that's right. So for us, there's just like a Wow in the World something for like every like kind of free time that we might have, which is really cool.
The second person to go down Niagara Falls in a barrel and live later died by slipping on an orange peel.
That's not true.
It's would they put it in this book if it wasn't true?
I guess not. I think because it's something that's helped him so much, we try to prioritize like making more connections than just the radio or just the podcast, because then it can like go through other parts of his life.
All right, was that the end of our video, Megan?
Nope, keep going.
Okay, I can't see it. I'm sorry.
It gets better.
Okay.
They're normal people, you know, like putting a face and like a person and personality to like the voices he hears all the time. Like it, that's an important thing to me is like everyone's reachable. Like we're all just people like in the world living, creating.
I just feel like my true self is able to come out and experience life.
That's a good answer. Ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you.
Now we're done, Laura.
Yeah, I
So
mean, just listening, I can tell why that was a special experience for you. And thank you for sharing the video with us.
of course,
Yeah.
yeah, so sweet. His one line about I feel like I can be my true self just cracks me every time. Well, I hope this video does a good job of capturing the essence of podcast fandom, where listening can lead to meaningful life experiences. It was one of the outcomes of the fandom phenomenon study from Wondery Dentsu, where Edison Research was tasked to understand podcast fandom across the US, documenting how people engage with and express their fandom in day-to-day life. In addition to in-depth and observational interviews, Edison conducted an online survey of over 3,000 US monthly podcast listeners aged 13 and older. Now, we know that the connection, we're going to go to the next one. Thank you, Laura. We know that connection is one of the key drivers of podcast fandom. So it's natural to step It's the natural next step that fans want to connect in new ways. And according to our survey, 43% of podcast fans have engaged with podcasts through other forms of media, such as TV, books, games, events, and more. And that's something we often heard in our in-depth interviews. And our favorite Wow in the World fan certainly was a good example of that. In that video, we followed Fox and his family to a live show in New York City. And after meeting the family, I was, of course, excited to watch Fox attend this event. But what I somehow did not anticipate was the fact that I was walking into a theater full of kids just like Fox and parents who are so happy that they could give this experience to their children. I really don't know how I can possibly describe the magic of that event other than saying it was simply wow. We got to observe what it was like being part of a community, which is another way this study demonstrates this idea that podcast fandom goes beyond listening. So finding a sense of community is, we're going to go back one, Laura. Oh,
Here we go.
there we go.
Okay, we got
I
it.
think they were out of order. Finding a sense of community is a primary driver for these fans. They are looking for like-minded people to engage with. 62% of fans, oh, and actually, no, we're still on the wrong slide. 43% was before, 62%. Here we go. 50.
Okay, we got it.
Oh gosh, let's start over. No, we'll keep going. Finding a sense of community is a primary driver for fans. They're looking for like-minded people to engage with, and 62% are fans because podcasts help them feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. If you're a podcaster, or if you're even a podcast listener, perhaps you've already sensed this feeling of being part of something bigger. But it's really nice to have a statistic to support that feeling. These findings and more are available to you on fandom.wondery.com. I encourage you to take a look if you haven't already. Thanks to Wondery and Dentsu for funding this research. It truly was a pleasure to talk to fans about something that brings them so much happiness. All right, number 6. This research is from the Women's Audio Report from Edison Research and SiriusXM Media, which was a comprehensive study exploring the relationship between women and audio consumption. This main finding is women's voices matter in podcast and music. And the report highlights how women-led content is a market force. Women-hosted shows are increasingly dominant. According to Edison Podcast Metrics, just about half of the top 25 shows among women having female hosts or co-hosts, compared to just 40% among adults 18 and older audience. You can see the women-hosted shows highlighted in purple there on the right. There are so many great women-hosted shows that the female audiences support. The Women's Report also draws from a custom online survey of over 2,000 total U.S. women aged 18 and older who had listened to audio in the last month. Now, a large portion of the female podcast listeners in the study told us that it matters to hear content from other women. And we learned that podcasters speak about the female experience in ways they can't hear elsewhere. 43% of women podcast listeners agree that podcasts with female perspectives cover topics not found elsewhere in media. And women actively seek representation and relevancy. 31% specifically seek out podcasts that are produced or hosted by women. When we asked about podcasts that they regularly listen to or watch, 33% of women say all or most of them are hosted or produced by women. And another 59% say some of them are hosted or produced by women. But look at those answers below by age. Younger women are far more likely to consume podcasts hosted by women. 54% of those aged 18 to 34 say that all or most of the podcasts they listen to are hosted or produced by women. And women's voices matter in the music space too, with significant differences in preferences across generations. Among women aged 18 to 34, 37% report that all or most of the musical artists they regularly listen to are female, but the percentage of women who primarily listen to female artists drops significantly with age. This report shows us that women, especially young women, want representation. More younger women are primarily listening to female artists than the older generations. And they've catapulted so many new young female artists into superstardom. These women will continue to have influence on the music industry as both young listeners and artists mature. Honestly, Laura, it's almost embarrassing. Women's voices matter shouldn't need to be a finding. Yet, it's important to say it for those who are still not listening. Smart brands are paying attention and are supporting women's voices in podcasts and music and elsewhere. Please continue to nurture and support women's voices. And thanks to SiriusXM Media for supporting the study and the women behind it.
Yes, amen to that. So maybe women's voices matter, like you said, does not need to. We will see the day that it does not need to be a top finding. But
Great, let's drop it from the list
yeah,
next year.
fantastic, fantastic research though. So since you presented points 6 and 7, I've got 5 next, and it's a two-parter. So we'll start with 5A. The majority of all daily listening time is spent with ad-supported audio. Now, this data is from our Share of Ear study. This is our syndicated survey of daily audio consumption in America. Share of Ear is the only audio survey in the US that pulls all audio consumption, puts it on a level playing field so we can evaluate radio versus streaming versus podcasts versus audiobooks, owned music like CDs and vinyl, and so on. And the beautiful part about Share of Ear is it lets us break that data into ad-supported and ad-free. So, of all audio listening in a typical day among those ages 13 plus, and all of that audio amounts to just under 4 hours in a typical day, by the way. 64% of that audio is to ad-supported sources. This is important to know. This is why it made our list. As consumers of audio, we have countless subscription paid audio service options, but the majority of our daily audio listening time is spent to ad-supported sources. What are those ad-supported sources? The biggest source of ad-supported audio, by a large margin, radio. Then there's podcast, youtube.com for music videos, and then the free versions of streaming services and satellite radio. But how does this break out by age? Even among younger listeners, like write this down, circle it, go back to this when we post it on our site. Those ages 13 to 34, over half of their daily listening is to ad-supported audio sources. Great news if you're an advertiser and you need to reach consumers with your message. And of course, you can see that ad-supported audio makes up the majority of the listening for those ages 35 plus. So picturing this ad-supported universe where we can reach people with messages. Now, the second part of this finding, 5B, tells a little bit of a different story as we focus on just streaming music. So finding 5B tells us that the time spent with streaming music has shifted from free to paid platforms. Now, first of all, we love graphs in general, but we love graphs like this because it tells a very clear story and you can easily see the trajectory of a behavior and when that crossover or that switch takes place. This is also Share of Ear data. Here you can see that we're going back to 2015. We have data for all these years so we can look at the trends. In this particular graph, we are only talking about streaming music services. So this is streaming music on services like Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, Apple, YouTube music streaming. The blue line represents free sources, those that are ad supported, and the orange represents paid sources, those with no ads. So in 2015, 78% of time spent with streaming music went to free sources and 22% went to paid. In 2020, that's where you can see that switch. What paid services became the bigger share at 52%. And today, in Q3 2025, Americans spend 66% of their daily streaming music listening with paid sources and 34% of that streaming music time with free sources. So we've seen a complete reversal in 10 years. And we also know that over half of Americans subscribe to at least one paid audio service. So when it comes to streaming music, consumers are paying to listen.
Okay, on to number 4. In-car shifts to digital. This is another finding from Infinite Dial. We asked those who have driven or ridden in a car in the last month about the media systems that they have in the vehicle. Specifically, if they have a phone integration system such as Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. In just 2 years, we've seen a jump from 26% to 40% of vehicles with CarPlay or Android Auto systems. Now, this represents a fundamental shift in how Americans access audio in their vehicles. Now, just because you have the system doesn't mean you use it. So let's see how phone integration plays into usage. It turns out that if they have it, they use it, or at least 83% of them do. Only 17% of those who have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto say they do not use the system. It's also worth noting, however, that despite these advantages in tech, the in-car environment is still overall won by terrestrial radio. This next graphic, released in Edison's Weekly Insights newsletter, shows the share of time spent listening to audio platforms in the car. Now, those who do not have an Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in the car, represented by that top bar there, spend 62% of their listening time using AM/FM radio, and the remaining time is split between the other sources. But even those who do have phone integration in the car spend most of their time with AM/FM radio. Just under half of their in-car listening time, at 47%, is spent with AM/FM radio. Of course, every time I talk about listening in the car, I like to remind people how slowly we see changes in this in-car environment, thanks to the amount of time people tend to hang on to their vehicles. Now, we've been watching this space for years, waiting to see if and when digital will take over. But despite recent gains, it's nowhere close to overtaking radio in terms of share in the car.
Yeah, that resiliency of radio in the car, the in-car listening environment really is just extraordinary. So it's something to watch. This next finding, we're on to number 3. This next finding was published in Weekly Insights very recently in October. It features data from Nielsen Podcast Fusion, powered by Edison Research. So finding number 3 is shifting ad budget to podcast can increase reach. Now, Nielsen Podcast Fusion just means that Edison Podcast Metrics podcast listening data has now been integrated into Nielsen's media planning tool that's used by agencies nationwide. That's Nielsen Media Impact, or NMI. And I promise, I feel like this sounds like an infomercial for podcasts. It's really not. The reality is we have 115 million weekly podcast listeners in the US, and it's critical for the industry to monetize those audiences. So now, for the first time, users can plan and optimize campaigns across TV, radio, and other media platforms, and those plans can now include podcasts. So in this example, we're looking at an example of a $5 million ad budget to reach adults ages 18-44. But on the left-hand side, the left graphic, podcasting accounts for just 1% of that plan, along with broadcast, cable, and YouTube. And that results in a 60% reach of that audience. On the right-hand side, the right of the graphic, you can see what happens to that reach when no additional money is added. That's the key, right? This is a $5 million budget. But when the allocation to podcast goes from 1% to 21% of that budget, the resulting reach is that the reach grows to 76%, a 27% lift or growth. And again, that's achieved for no additional dollars. So what we see is the marrying of the podcast measurement tool with a media planning tool. And it really kind of eliminates guesswork and allows the podcast industry to compete for those bigger ad budgets. So definitely an exciting advancement and worthy of the list this year.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, point 2, we're going to shift gears just a little bit. Point 2 serves to remind us that many studies that we present are US based, and it is worthwhile to look beyond ourselves to the audio habits and landscapes in other countries. So part 2 is that smart speaker adoption varies by country. And this data is courtesy of the Infinite Dial reports in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and the US. Megan's been talking about Infinite Dial data. It is the longest running annual survey of digital media consumer in America. It's been going since 1998. It has expanded to several more countries since then. Before we talk about the data point, I want to shout out the sponsors for the Infinite Dial. What you see on the screen, these are industry leaders in each of their respective countries. You see their names here. They choose to sponsor these studies and invest and then make the data available at no charge to you. So kudos to the sponsors for making these studies available. Again, free data, it is available online. So regarding smart speakers, we have smart speakers available everywhere in the US with screens, without screens. They sit on our kitchen counters, they live in your thermostat, speaking for myself. But it's surprising then when we see that the US number here is where it is in this graph. We are 35% of those ages 12 plus in the US owning a smart speaker. Now, you will note here that the demos vary a little bit from country to country for various reasons, but we are the second bar over in this graph. New Zealand is at 22% ownership among those ages 16 or older. And then there's more widespread adoption in Australia at 40%, and then in the UK at 45%, where 45% of those 16 and older own one of the devices. So different market conditions, the relationship between smart speaker manufacturers and subscription services all factor into these differences. And of course, smart speakers allow us to access a number of audio sources, streaming radio, podcasts, audiobooks, and so forth. And generally, when we talk about smart speakers, we characterize them as voice activated assistants, right? So you can use them, again, speaking for myself, cooking conversions in the kitchen, weather reports, answer questions. But smart speakers are getting smarter. And you may have taken notice of some new campaigns on TV using celebrities, Nikki Glazer and Lil Wayne and Pete Davidson, about subscription services to enhance your smart speakers capabilities. And it really highlights the point that these devices are more than just speakers. They are complex AI powered devices, which I think sets you up pretty nicely for your next point, point number one.
That's right. Speaking of AI, brace yourself for this one. Consumption of AI narrated audio is increasing. In 2025, two different studies from Edison Research documented that Americans are consuming AI narrated audio. The first is from the Audio Publishers Association, otherwise known as the APA. Edison is lucky to conduct a study for this organization every year, which allows us to monitor changes in the audiobook listeners' behavior over time. And the 2025 online survey of 1,700 US adults aged 18 and older pointed to an increase in consumption of AI narrated audiobooks. However, the willingness, and this is where we switch, Laura. There we go.
Okay.
However, the willingness to try AI narrated audiobooks dropped year over year from 77% in 2023 to 70% in 2025. So it's an interesting dance as AI increases in the market. The consumer attitudes towards the technology are evolving. We also addressed this topic in the podcast space. The next research was presented by Gabriel Soto from Edison Research at Podcast Movement in August. In Q2 2025, Edison Research asked US weekly podcast consumers aged 13 and older, have you ever listened to a podcast that was narrated by an artificially generated or AI voice? And 22% of these weekly podcast listeners indicated that they have listened to podcasts narrated by AI. Now, we followed up this survey with some in-person interviews with podcast listeners to better understand their attitudes on AI voices in podcasts. And I think it's best you hear it from them. Now, this is the point where I have to juggle two computers, so let's see if I can do it.
I believe in you.
Patience, please. Share sound, and we're good.
I've heard of those. I sometimes listen to audiobooks that are read by AI, but again, it takes something away from it for me, because I'm in it for the people that are doing it. And when it's not a real person, and I can tell by the inflection of the voice and the lack of emotion in it, I'm like, this is not quite my speed.
I've never heard of that, but if there were any AI podcasts, I won't listen to that, because I like bantering. I like witty speakers. I like good conversationalists, and I can't imagine AI being able to do that ever.
I know that because with New York Times, like if it's a long article, there'll be a reader, an electronic reader, and I've done that. But like, yeah, it's okay, because it would take long to read the article, and again, it's about a practicality situation. I have to do something else, but I would like to read this article, but I can't do both at the same time. So I'm going to multitask by having the AI reader that the New York Times has do it. But that's the only exception I have to that. I don't want a podcast to tell, because like Kirk's saying, I'm in it for the hosts, I'm in it for the guests. But this is some robot telling me what the news is. Like, AI is great when, like, I'll be honest, when I type emails for my job and Google will complete a sentence for me, because I do a lot of boilerplate stuff. I don't hate that. That part makes my job easier. But I don't want it to be doing the creative stuff. I don't want it to be doing the stuff that when I don't work does that for me. I want to do the stuff that makes the certain day-to-day stuff easier. Like there's a meme on a thing like, like I want AI to do like the dishes and take out the trash, not my job. I mean, that's oversimplification of the idea, but that's kind of where it's going.
You take the humanity out of that particular podcast. And I mean, and that's where I think it gets dangerous, isn't it? Not being able to tell anymore, like what's real and what's AI. And I think that's almost taking it a step too far, is to try to turn it into something that's human and confusing people. And I mean, I feel like, again, it goes back to who's executing it, right? So if it's the AI, even if it's the person's voice, if it's a robot projecting someone else's voice and the robot's doing the work, it's taking away the nuance and the creativity and the in the momentness, if that makes sense, that only human beings can sort of provide. Because the awareness that we have versus the AI being like non-aware. And it's scary that the AI is becoming closer to being sentient and aware, and then that line is becoming a lot thinner. So the more we can get away from that happening, I think the better.
So Rich Eisen's one of your favorite podcasts. Let's say you listen to an episode and you really liked it, and later on you even find out that it was actually an AI version.
He's a robot. That's it. He rips off a mask one day, and it's nothing but T2 or T3.
Right.
That's it. You're done.
I would be impressed at the level of the technology, but I would also not like it. I would feel like I was robbed of getting to listen to a person, rather than, even though I was convinced it was a person, it still wasn't a person at the end of the day. And even if, there's the thing, like if I never found out, I would have gone on believing that it was a real person, but I would have felt cheated because, I wasn't listening to a human being.
So many feelings expressed by those participants and there. And, there are some applications for AI that maybe your listeners would accept, but they still recognize and they appreciate humanity. And that's something positive to hold on to in 2026 for sure.
Excellent number one finding. And I'm betting that we were going to see on next year's list some more AI findings. So, all right, we're here with a bonus finding. So we did our top 10. We generally have a bonus finding. This is our bonus finding this year. This data comes from an Edison Research national survey, and we find that more than 30% of Americans are awake by 6 a.m. Now, feel free to use this next graph to judge yourself, judge your friends, decide how your wake-up habits compare with the rest of America. Note that this finding is not on podcasts. It's not on audio consumption at all. But we did the statistics several years ago. It ended up being one of our most requested statistics to update. So this is the update for you. And Megan, you created this beauty of a graph. So thank you very much. You can see that the bars show percentage of listening in each 30-minute period. And then the blue line shows the cumulative total. So you can see that that adds up to more than 30% up to 6 a.m. And then we see that spike between 6 and 6:30 of 14.5%. And generally, by 9:30, most people are up. Less than 2% say they're up after 11 a.m. So if you subscribe to Weekly Insights, this is something that came out in Weekly Insights. This just goes to illustrate that our research offerings do encompass a little bit more than just audio. Really, it's a very broad spectrum of research. So if you want a once a week email with some of these insights, please sign up. It is free. We just email you once a week, and we do not sell your data. And that is how to subscribe. You can find it at edisonresearch.com/subscribe. So we'd love to send these to you every week.
Great read, great read. Thanks for spending time with us today to reflect on a year of research. If you've made it this far, you've qualified for our giveaway drawing, and the gifted Laura Sylvia will randomly select 2 people who get the gifts. Laura, who are our lucky winners?
All right, and this is when we could use some sound effects too, some drum rolls. But we have Katie O'Donnell and Mary
Katie.
Lee Quaid.
Katie and Mary, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, congratulations to the winners, and we will reach out to you for mailing addresses so we can send your swag. And that is it. That's our wrap on top 10 of 2025. Thank you to all of our clients and all of you for supporting our research throughout the year.
We have to give a huge shout out to everyone behind these findings for all of your hard work. Thanks for all you do to put these insights into the world. And we're so grateful that we have people interested in our research. So thank you for watching. You can visit edisonresearch.com to view the webinar replay after today. And if you like it, please share it with others.
Right. And that's it. Thank you for joining us today. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye, everyone.